Well, I'm thrilled to be back with y'all.
We are so thrilled to have you. Okay, I don't know why I couldn't find my share. It's right there in the middle of the screen. Okay. Ah, well, let's go
I,
ahead. Go.
yeah,
Let's.
and I just want to say one thing to y'all. I was so into the moment of being with y'all, and y'all were so interactive. You made so many comments. I totally forgot about the PowerPoint. So I am so sorry, and I'm going to do better today. I'm going to be tuning into it. But when you're in an actual conversation, it seems wrong. I'll be judgmental. It seems wrong to stop that to go to some kind of structure that we put in place that may or may not have made sense at the time. So I'm glad to be here, and I'm going to be obeying
Well, you'll be on
obeying
your
the power.
on your best behavior
Yes,
today. All
I
right. Well, thank you everybody for joining Nancy and I today for May's Community of Practice, part 2 of an integrated approach to job development. Let's cover a couple of the housekeeping things real quick before we get started. We are recording today, and we'll be sure to share the recording along with any materials out to sorry, I was muting somebody and I shouldn't do 2 things at once. But we'll be sure to share the recording and the materials out to the mailing list afterwards. So just be sure to mute yourself when we're chatting, but otherwise Nancy and I are going to be engaging you a lot today. So feel free to share your questions, comments, reactions in the chat, but then also unmute, turn your camera on once we kind of dive into some conversation. Let's see, closed captioning is available. Okay, and the stream text link is in the chat. Thank you so much to our captioner, Heather. We love having the Georgia Institute of Technology here to help us. You guys always do a fabulous job. Thank you so much. 1 second, my coworker. Let me ask my coworker to move. Just a second. I have the best coworkers. So anyway, thank you so much. So I think then, without further ado, we'll just jump right into it. Hopefully you all know the wonderful Nancy Brooks Lane, Griffin-Hammis Associate, and expert in all things customized employment and job development and social capital, and just all around wonderful human being. So we're just excited to have her here today and her energy. So let's just jump in. As you know, let's see, last month in April, we talked about transition, right? And we talked about the state's new IEP system. Prior to that, Nancy and I led you in a discussion around kind of all things related to business engagement, employer development, right? Relationship building. And so Nancy and I kind of wanted to come back today and dive in a little bit deeper into the topics of the informational interview, or the strategy, or the approach that we're calling the informational interview. And we want to talk to you about, utilizing this strategy, this approach, if you will, as a way of developing right work experiences, discovery activities, possibly, right? As well as like a mechanism to be building that business network, right? And that database of employment ideas, right? Exploring the infinity of vocational themes, right? Of
I
vocation.
love that infinity of vocational themes
It's
and infinity of the number of ways you can earn money doing work.
right. Carrie always says, right, there's an endless amount of ways to make a living in the world, right? And so that's what Nancy and I are talking about, right? And if we think about, we'll talk a little bit about vocational themes today, right? So a little bit of foreshadowing for you, right? But the informational interview can also be utilized, right, to discover new types of jobs or industries, right? To learn more about a business, to learn more about the business's manager and or owner and kind of their work and what they do, right? And also as a mechanism to introduce yourself, right? As well as an employment seeker, right? In a way that's conversational and authentic, and is kind of meeting everybody where they're at, right? And then we also want to talk about the value and the role of social capital, or right, relationships, reciprocity, right? When it comes to getting to know employment seekers, right? And those we're working with, right? How do we utilize that, our capital, their capital, capital of the team, as well as a way, again, right, to build that network, to explore that network, to get connected to business, and to get connected to other people with similar interests and or vocational themes as the employment seekers that we're working with. So that's kind of what we are hoping to cover and for you to kind of take away today. And again, we're going to integrate a lot more conversation today. So get ready to share. So, Nancy, I don't know if you want to hop in or if you want me to, but I thought we could just start with the informational interview and talking a little bit about, what it is and why we use it and what we can do with it.
Absolutely. So informational interviews can occur during discovery, where someone's just gathering information to find out whether or not what they think they're interested in is actually what they are interested in. Once they get the nuts and bolts of what that particular interest entails. Kind of a stereotypical example is I know I have worked with folks who thought they wanted to do work with animals, and we think about vocational themes that could be in the world of medicine, working with a vet. It could be retail, working in a pet store. It could be advocacy to stop abuse and or at least be a part of a movement educating people about abuse. It could entail, domestic animals. It could entail farm animals. It could entail exotic animals. So, helping the person learn enough about all those aspects of what it means to be employed in the world of work that has to do with animals is important, because we have false notions about what a particular job is. I know there have been many times I thought, I think I'd like to do that. But when I dug into it, I thought, oh, I didn't know it involved that. No, that's not me. So the same thing can happen. And this is that stereotypical example. Someone thought they wanted to work with dogs. They have an experience. They have to clean out the dog bowl, the food, the poop. And that is a job killer. They did not want to do it. They thought it was just playing with the dogs. So that's why informational interviews during discovery are such powerful tools, because it can help the person learn what's involved in a particular interest. And then you'll see we also do informational interviews during discovery, which again is focusing on how we've gotten to know the job seeker. We've gotten to know businesses. We identify of those businesses possibly a good fit. And then we begin to
I'm in a training.
having that deeper
Is it important, like critical, or? Mm-hmm.
I hate to eavesdrop.
It's supposed to automatically save. You can upload and save as.
Oh, she has
Try
been
it
so
that
kind
route.
helping someone.
Are you using a form that you
I think you
downloaded
guys
onto
can
your
mute her.
computer, or are you just?
I know, I'm
changing the
trying to
one
find
that-
who it is. I so apologize. There we go. Sorry. Took me a minute. I apologize. Yeah.
He had no idea we were listening to
I
a conversation that we weren't supposed to listen to.
was going to say, I didn't mean to be rude. Very sorry.
But we found out, we discovered in that moment that Kelly is a kind person and willing to
She-
help.
Yes,
Some
yes.
some
Right?
computer
She might have a theme in advocacy or helping others.
teaching,
Yes,
might be
teaching.
teaching.
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
poor
Love it.
Kelly. Um, but anyway, during the job development process, we're using informational interviews with a different focus, and that is to match well who the job seeker is, who the business is, and how that relationship can come together to meet the business's needs. So, um, when anytime we're talking to someone, we want to make sure we're talking to the right people, or it's a waste of time. And it's hard enough to pull together the process to connect. So to not have it worked out from the get-go that this is the right connection,
Mm.
um, is just a waste of time and frustrating. So make sure you're talking with someone who has some authority, some knowledge, like a manager, the owner, a key person, someone who does that job. Um, Avoid HR, because HR and typically small businesses, mom and pop shops, as we say, and that's kind of even become, I don't know if that's derogatory now.
Yeah.
We've used it so much in ways that some people have used it in a negative way. So I mean it in the most positive way. Shops that are so small that maybe they don't have an HR department. Um, don't ask for a tour, in the sense that that is kind of an old way of finding out a business. For example, people would go to factories and say, "Hey, can we have a tour of your factory and learn more about it?" Um, so if we can keep out of our vernacular terms that might have been used in the past, that have a connotation that maybe not what we're thinking about now. So what we're thinking about with a tour is really getting to know, okay, what is this business all about? And first of all, we need to do our groundwork. It's so rude and um, not a good practice to go to a business where you haven't even researched it. I think we talked a little bit. I have seen or heard people go to businesses and ask what they do. Well, that tells me you are not interested. Um, so if you're coming there in the role of a career counselor or job developer, whatever title you use, um, you need to have enough respect and I know y'all do. It sounds like I'm putting you down, and I'm not. I know y'all do this, but I'm just speaking in the universal you. That there needs to be good research, getting to know that business. Also, research around, if you figure out what the mission is, what they sell, what they do, find out more about what businesses are like so you're knowledgeable. Um, I know one time I was working with a business. I knew nothing about the business, but I had read about this trend that's developing, and it actually had to do with uh, produce around gardening, and the values of the organization were to provide fresh garden, in fruits, vegetables, flowers, to markets locally and restaurants that were within a 25-mile distance. So it already had this progressive thinking about nutrition and health and um, uh, nutritional justice and all of that. And so one thing I had read about was this great movement around heirloom seeds and this community around really building um, an inventory of heirloom seeds. So only because I had read that did I know that, and I brought it up to the business owner. Has he thought about that? And he loved it and wanted to get into that. And it made me look like I care, which I do. Man, do I care. Um, but it also showed that I had enough interest that I looked at, what's the latest, greatest stuff happening in that person's profession. So research as much as you can with the job seeker, so they're informed too. Um, Also, anytime we're trying to find out information, we want to avoid questions that can result in a yes or no answer because that tells us nothing, does it? Um, if we can do open-ended questions, then the person's going to answer it based on what's important to them because they're not being led. There's this open-ended question they're going to focus on. This is what comes to mind. This is what is important to me as they answer those questions. Um, Also, if there are opportunities for the person to spend a little bit of time in that work environment doing some of the tasks, that is really invaluable. Some businesses aren't comfortable with that, but it never hurts to ask. And again, you've got to be authentic, you've got to be real. Know that as you are learning this methodology, it's going to be somewhat formulaic. When I was doing this work, sometimes I fell over my own words. And I would say, I am so sorry. This is not how I want to present myself to you. I am learning these new skills and it is so important to me. And you are important to me. And so I'm a little bit nervous. So I am not doing a very good job. May I start over? And it typically results in laughter, a bit of bonding because you are so human and you're able to say how much this is important to you. And everybody, when they try something new, doesn't get it right. And so when you can trust someone because they are so honest, even if it's embarrassing to them, then that can be part of developing that bond and that ability to trust one another. Um, I don't know, Jess, do you want to pick up some? I feel like I'm talking so
Well,
much.
no, it's wonderful. Hey, I'm wondering, as you were talking, there was a couple of things, so you talked about not using terms of the past or that might have a certain connotation. And at that specific example, you were talking about the tour. That got me thinking about, you know, what, what are your thoughts or, what guidance do you give people when it comes to how you introduce yourself or how you talk about like your work or maybe the work of your agency? Do you talk about that, the first time, the second time, and like what does it sound like? Because I feel like it's the words that we choose, right? I feel like are very important when we're talking about, not only when we're first engaging, right, and kind of asking, for the informational interview, let's say, but then, when it comes time to talk about, well, who the heck am I? And what
Yeah,
do I do? Right.
yeah.
So yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
I try to get away from any jargon. I don't use the words that are typically within the disability industrial complex job descriptions.
Mhm.
uh, I look at, for example, if I am digging into a small business around technology or gardening and community engagement around um, nutritional justice or um, health and beauty or whatever. I really read what's the latest greatest stuff happening in that industry and how is it talked about. I will watch YouTube videos of people talking about their work, so I use the language
Mm.
that would make sense, and typically people know what career counselors are. um, and so if there needs to be a focus on who I am and all of that, I will say that I'm a career counselor. My passion is economic development and increasing the employment rate in communities because we know when more people are working, the community thrives. And we especially love supporting small businesses and medium-sized businesses. And we see them as really the heart of community. Small businesses are so connected to community. It's not like a big box shop that can do analytics and say, oh, we're not making a profit, let's move out of this town. With big corporations, there's typically not that emotional connection to a community. So I speak in that way. If they want to know more about what I do, or there is a wondering about disability, then I speak in terms of we have found, because we've put a lot of time and effort into research. And I know that's boring and it might feel weird for us to talk about that.
Yeah.
But what we have found, if we do a good job of figuring out who a person is based on their interests, their passions, their vocational themes, and we do a good job of getting to know a business and their mission and what they do, then we can help be a part of the solution to the hiring issues. And we know that that's rampant. And we spend a lot of time up front getting to know the person because we want them to succeed. The work involves people who care about the individual. And they are people who have a connection to the person or who have a connection to wanting to make sure that the employment rate is substantial in the community. So that's how I talk about it. And if they specifically say, well, do you work with people with disabilities? I'll say, I absolutely do. We find that everybody, again, if we do our job well, can meet the needs of the world of business based on who they are, what their interests are, what their skills are, or what the skills that they can learn are. So we feel whether you have a disability or not, you can certainly be a contributor and become a working citizen.
I have other thoughts, but we touched on that. I'll come to our questions and kind of open it up to the group too, because I was kind of curious. Research is the key. Yeah, let's just open it up to the group because I was like gonna have more questions, but I'm kind of curious. So now,
Jess, before we get to that, can I just add one more bit of info?
oh, please.
One thing that, again, I don't want to overload the person by just talking and talking and talking because we're there to hear and listen. But I also sometimes will get into, or at least an opportunity presents itself, to let it be known. I've done a lot of reading and I have the statistics about the number of people who know someone with a disability. So I'll bring that up and talk about, and I talk about it in terms of business journals. If it's a business that is valued, if it's more of the mom and pop shop, I don't get into that kind of stuff because that would be a turnoff. It would seem like I'm too out of touch and I'm too into this world of what is not part of the structure or the model that they value. So I talk more colloquially. But in essence, one thing that I try to do is just put out there too that, one thing that's very interesting is that the number of people who know someone who has a disability is whatever that statistic is. I don't have it off the top of my head now. The fact that if we all live long enough, we're all going to have some form of disability. Our vision, possibly our mobility, our cognition. So disability is natural. It's just a part of the human condition. And sometimes it happens to people very early on in their life. And sometimes it happens to us later in our life. So I try to also, make disability not a topic that seems so out there, that it's foreign.
Right. An outlier.
Yeah.
Like you said, a foreign or other, right? That's kind of what we're working against as well. Well, and I think it's so great that you were sharing that because to me, that gets at some of the questions or that I sometimes hear from the field around liability, or, we don't do that here. Maybe type of feedback, or I think recently, I thought this was really interesting. A particular agency has done such an incredible job in their small community of building a reputation of caring for others, right? And protecting and advocating for others, right? In their community that might be disabled and or vulnerable. And they've done such a brilliant job at that work that then when they move, when they're working on economic development, right? And working on getting to know businesses like they do people, that's the context for the business. Oh, you're the charity, agency, you're right. And just kind of that balance, trying to balance, that part of their work with the other part of their work, which is what you just described, which is economic development and building their community and building capital for folks and stuff like that. So I think it's interesting to hear, how different professionals kind of approach those different scenarios. I think it's helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing, we can spend time or we can get in a headbutting relationship with organizations that we like. Kelly, how offensive that someone said, we don't do that here. What, we don't hire people with disabilities, that here. How demeaning. Then,
Right.
I think some people get into the role of wanting to take it to a level of antagonism. In some cases that's important. But if I hear that language, I have so much work to do around supporting people to have the life they want and connecting with those good people in the world that are already at that good place. To me, it's just like, ooh, I wouldn't want to work there. I wouldn't want anyone I love and care about to work there. And I'm not going to put any more energy into that. That is one of those things that I say, okay, no, I'm
Right.
not interested in that.
You learned something, right? Yeah, you learned something,
yeah.
right? That maybe that culture, right, isn't going to be a fit.
Right. And it's not
Yeah.
my job or my interest to try to change it.
Right.
They've got to come to that place on their own. So if you can look for those businesses that have a bigger worldview when you're researching them, are they a business that gives back to the community? Are they a business that has diversity? Are they a business that has a social as well as a business mission? That can be so critical because it shows that they want to be more than a profit center. They actually want to do something that benefits the community. And also when you walk in the door, you can see signs that the person may think a little bit differently. Like I think I shared with y'all Wes, who did laminating last time. And I think I shared that when I walked into this small business, they had a parrot that was on top of its cage. They had a cat. So that told me right there, like they love animals. They're willing to define their business as a place where animals are welcome. And sometimes people have a bigger view when that's the case. So sometimes when you just kind of walk through, if you're trying to kind of assess and check out, you may find signs or language that they use that gets to, oh, that really does speak to their values.
Right. Yes. I'm thinking of examples I can imagine. Right. Yeah. Things in the window that represent support for social justice issues or allyship, or like you said, there's a shop cat, and gosh, isn't that a place we want to be? Probably, right? Right. Yes. No, absolutely. And the signs, the clues, right?
Absolutely. I'm sure so many of you have walked into a space where the energy was so bad. And I don't mean this in a woohoo way. I just mean, we know from quantum physics, energy can be felt. It's those vibrations that impact our body. And it probably does sound like I'm being woohoo, but if you are interested And those things that happen beyond what our senses can pick up, quantum physics is a great place to start. It's just fantastic. So, and I think maybe I mentioned too that if you get a gut feeling, the brain cells that tie into that kind of emotional picking up on, this doesn't feel right, also are in our gut. So if you get a gut feeling, go with it. So you can also, like I said, just tune into on that kind of organic level. How does this space feel? And I've been in so many spaces where I think, oh, I can't get out of here fast enough. And I'm not saying a word. It's just that, oh, something doesn't feel right here.
Mhm. So let's open it up to you guys. Now that we've kind of talked about the informational interview, I'm kind of curious how you utilize the informational interview in your work now. It might look different than what Nancy and I just described, but we're curious. We just kind of want to know, are you using it? How do you use it now? What's working about it? What isn't? Yeah, just kind of interested in hearing. We can dive into some of these other questions. Oh, I've got something in the chat. Oh, okay. Heather's got to go. Sorry. Thanks. I get it. Thanks for joining us today. But yeah, curious. Because I think sometimes I hear from the field, like, I do informational interviews, but I don't do it like that. Or, my intention is not necessarily to just ask for advice. So just kind of
And if you're not using them, would you like to talk about how to get started? What could that look like?
I know I got a couple practitioners on, but I wonder, maybe you're busy or in a, oh boy. There's Miss Marsha. Hey, Marsha. Hey.
With one thing that I've been encouraging, especially some of my tech savvy folks, and Nancy, I primarily serve individuals who need supported employment services. So we've contacted a job developer and may or will be, maybe not there yet, but if they're able to use email and use Google, that's my baseline for look things up on the computer. Can you Google? And then maybe you need to get curious, and maybe we can help you get curious about places in your neighborhood where you might want to work, or places that is a business but you don't know what they do. So let's get curious and look things up and spend a little homework time figuring out if there's anything of interest or that looks cool based on what we can see. So in essence, kind of doing that investigation a little bit prior to knocking on the door and saying, can we come in and see what you do?
Absolutely.
By the time we're knocking on the door, we've decided that that place looks cool for whatever reason. Yeah, so there's a place in Valley Junction here, a traditional small storefront shopping area, and the Coffee Cat. And so they have cats up for adoption at the coffee place.
Oh, love it. A cat cafe?
Yes, there we go. That kind of place. So, but just walking down that street, or those streets, if someone lives not far from that area in West Des Moines, is a nice way of seeing just a variety of stuff, because it's a cool area, but then to pick a lot of different interests and visual input and style of places. Very traditional clothing store with someone dressed very conservatively welcoming you in, versus place that, is not. Um,
Oh, I
and,
love it.
and, which place does the person seem to go toward? Um, a bead place right next to an antique store. All sorts of cool stuff, just in terms of taking a walk around 4 blocks, you can get a really good handle on a lot of potential areas of interest.
Oh, I love that. Marsha, you said several things that just caught my eye as, oh my gosh, you get it. One is get curious. I love that. If we lose our curiosity, then, our life is going to be pretty staid. It's not going to have that dynamic growth. So I love that you use that. Um, Also, that a place looks cool. Right. If something looks cool, you can probably bet that they have a quirky way of thinking about the world, or have a bigger worldview, or value diversity, inclusion, and see community as a place where everyone can thrive. And that's not always the case, but I love that I look for that too. I look for places that are quirky and cool. And then the Cat Cafe, they're giving back. They have a business tied to, what cafes are about, but they also are doing good for cats. I love cat cafes. Um, so the other thing that you said that I absolutely love is that you said, in working with the individual, looking what they're drawn to. If people have the freedom to do what they want to do or go toward what is of their interest, then that gives you a lot of information instead of saying, hey, let's go over here. I think you might be interested in this. So I've done that so many times, finding the place where small businesses thrive and just walking around with the person that I get to work with who happens to have a disability and wants to become employed, and just see what they're drawn to. So, Marcia, I am so impressed with you. So much the way you use language and the things that you said tells me a lot about you. And we can do that with business owners too, because they will speak and using words that tell us more about how they see the world and whether or not it's a place that makes a good match for someone who happens to have a disability, and people who don't have a disability. It sounds like some of those places would be fun to work in no matter what.
Yeah. Well, and what I liked about your comments too, Marcia, is to me, it also, you described maybe a process that you could take outside of discovery. Right. So we know that the type of things that you described are built into discovery, right? There's neighborhood and community mapping and exploration and looking at things tied to themes and possible interests. And then later on, right, we definitely explore that through some formal informational interviews. But what you described could also happen outside of a discovery service, right? I mean, you could, as you both described, you could find places where small business thrive. You could support the person in exploring and see what they're drawn to, and kind of extrapolate that out to a broader theme, or maybe it's something, right? So that's what I loved about it too, because you could kind of, back to that other slide we were on, you can absolutely use this strategy and some of the things that Marcia described and Nancy described outside of the discovery service, right? In some kind of supported employment service, or in your strategies and your time spent getting to know the person, right? And what their interests are and where those lie. So I love that. That's brilliant.
And
Thank you.
the piece about um what you were saying, Jess, I love too, because we know something is a good practice
Right.
if it doesn't make itself so specific to a group of people that it's outside the norm. If something works for people with or without disabilities, then that is a good practice. That's a best practice.
Right. It is, right? I was just thinking, I mean, we know what the research says about the strategy, right? And what the field says about the strategy and how it's used and how valuable it is. And then discovery and specifically, right, fidelity and the tenets of fidelity tell us how valuable that particular component or strategy is. But you're right, like, why wouldn't we use something that works, kind of regardless of our approach, or if we're meeting the person where they're at, right? But then we can utilize a promising practice. And I kind of feel like as an economic development specialist or as a job developer or whatever, right? This is just something that I can be doing kind of all the time, naturally, both in my personal life and my professional life, utilizing the strategy and things built into the strategy that, just like connecting with people authentically and having a conversation. I could do that anytime, right? It doesn't have to be because I've set up an informational interview or I'm with a job candidate, exploring a particular part of the community. So I digress now.
Well,
Like my favorite, it's like one of my favorite strategies are, tools in the tool belt. It's just.
and another angle on the approaching a business, having done your research, it wasn't me. It was my young adult kid who didn't like working at Hy-Vee because like they were all over the place, and he basically got to pick out his own job because they were so desperate for having people. But he worked there for 6 months, and then he's like, I think I'm ready for something a little more complicated. And we talked about some businesses and stuff, and he followed up and put in a couple of applications, and maybe in the rehab counselor. So have you followed up? Have you checked in? Have you gone back? What do I know? Nothing. Okay, fine.
Right.
But
Come on, Mom. Yeah.
get with it, right? People don't do that.
Yeah.
Can I text him? No, that doesn't count. But what he did was look up one particular company that was of interest to him on LinkedIn, on the company website, and then took that information and looked on LinkedIn, so that when he did stop and do a follow-up, they weren't particularly hiring at that moment, but when he said, oh, I looked up your information on the internet, and then I looked you up on LinkedIn to see if I thought that you would be a good person for me to work with, and I was really impressed with your work history. The guy was like, how could you not hire him? And
right, or want to at least have a conversation with them, right? Yeah.
And that's worked out
so
very
smart.
nicely. But that's just, it's like, I didn't even know he knew what LinkedIn was, but okay.
And he said, so he said your work experience.
Yeah, Ben talked about the supervisor's work experience that he could see on LinkedIn, and that he had good work history and was interested in that and thought he would be someone that he could work with.
I love those words.
I do too.
Yeah.
And the beauty of it, he is letting it be known, I'm committed. I am going to make a thoughtful, logical decision. And a lot of times folks just take a job and maybe jump from place to place. And when someone leaves a job after a short time, that's a huge financial burden, because all of that goes into orienting and getting the person set up. So that is one of the things that people who want to find the right people look for as well. And it's something that we can incorporate in the work we do with job seekers, that they are looking for a particular customized in job, vocational theme, etc. So that's a very thoughtful, and as Jess loves to use this word, and I do too, intentional method.
Yeah.
We're not looking for just anything. We're looking for something that's a good fit. And remember too that these methods come out of the progressive business world. I think I shared with you about Richard Branson last time. And, he's one of the billionaires. He has a great social mission. He has dyslexia. And so values disability and diversity. And he hires based on not the degree someone may have, or the formal education. He values lived experience. You know, we learn and grow, and lived experience is not just tied to disability, it's tied to, yes, we have experienced this specific aspect of a task, our work, our life, our sorrow, our disability. And so we have knowledge that not just anyone would have. So he values that, but he hires based on personality and their fit with the culture, because if they're a good fit with the culture, they can teach methodology. And that's right out of discovery and customized employment. It's finding those good fits. So what had at one time seemed kind of esoteric when we began doing this work is not anymore. You know, finding out the good fit between a potential employee and a business. And that's why they want to do more of the um, uh, resumes that aren't paper resumes that get to who this person is. So there are video resumes, there's infographics tied to resumes, there are visual resumes.
Yeah, and that actually reminds me, I'm glad you, Anita left a comment about creating, built a brochure for informational interviews. And then she says, maybe was thinking about a letter ? Anita, are you on? Do you want to tell us a little bit more? Tell me a little bit more about that, because that sounds interesting. And I think I have some things to share with you that you might be interested in.
Yeah, it's something I've been working on for about a month, and I just think we need something not just for discovery, but job development, and explain not just at an informational interview, but as in the community itself and what it consists of. And I was thinking of going to visit some places that don't utilize disabilities. And I was wondering if I really needed to design a informational letter for that. It's just we had our 50-year anniversary last year, and I had no documentation for that. So it's kind of a brochure for many different avenues of our business, not
I
just for
see.
the client, not just for the businesses, because we're a dual client process, but it would help explain just what we do and where we're successful at. But I thought about sending them or taking them to businesses that we have not been in yet in this community.
Interesting. Interesting.
Yeah. I don't know if it works yet. I haven't got the opportunity to try them out.
Right. Right. Well, I think, that's interesting. I think you could, and you said, so it's agency focused. I wonder how valuable something that's like individual focused might be. Like a brochure. And I think that's what I was thinking of sharing with you. Somebody had recently shared with me an example of like a leave behind, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. That's
But it was specific to a person. So it was a leave behind for Jess. It was a leave behind for Jess. It was a leave behind for Nancy that highlighted, or it kind of introduced who I was and like highlighted my skills. So like a visual resume or a resume of some sort that kind of highlighted what I did or what I do, kind of what I bring to the table versus like what the agency brings to the table. So
I also made them so I could mail them out. So
Mm.
on the back of them, I could just mail them out. I don't know, peak times in our community, economic development, so to speak. When we're the busiest, like field work is pretty on board right now, and Iowa will be, detasseling, stuff like that.
Mhm.
I like your idea with the make it person directed.
Right, person
I like that.
specific.
Yeah, person specific.
Yeah, I don't know. I see what you're saying. I would be curious to see it. I think there could be a lot of value in it. But I also see a lot of value, or I guess some traction, I guess, on things that are like individualized. But
You know, the thought just come to my mind is maybe we could bring this to a table as a discovery project and see what they can do in building their
mm,
own brochure.
yes, yes, and yes. So that's a great idea, Anita. So I'll share some examples with you. There's a employment seeker that I'm working with that's is really loves voiceovers and is a talented actor, essentially. And so big broad theme, maybe around entertainment or something like that. But also is a huge history buff, and had previously worked as kind of like a tour guide, if you will, on a military ship out in California, providing tours on the ship. So kind of what we had thought about doing, and he's working on it now, is he's developing his portfolio that highlights some of his skill sets and knowledge around history and the military, because that's kind of his other emerging theme, right? Where a lot of his skills and talents and passions lie. But he's also using his voiceover skills to kind of marry the two. So it's kind of like a audio visual type of resume or leave behind, right? It's just a super short video that this is like who I am. And these are some of my skills and personal attributes. And then he's using his own voice to kind of narrate that, if you will, and showing off some of that talent. Or, another job candidate is really into what's called manga, which is like, oh, now I'm losing the word, like cartoons. No, that's the word. People would be really upset with me that I just called it cartoons. But I just can't find my words. So think of like anime. There we go. Anime and comic books and, animated stories and stuff like that. She's really into that and knows a lot about it. And then also has some computer skills and video editing skills, if you will, and using different apps on her phones to create her own GIFs, if you will, GIF. And so she's developing kind of her own portfolio, if you will, not even a resume, portfolio of her work. She's pulling together the different like GIFs or images or pictures that she's ever created, the different videos that she's maybe edited. She's kind of pulling that together in some kind of, right now it's like it's on a zip drive, right? And it's kind of like a file with multiple files, and we'll maybe pull it together in some kind of way. So I love the way you're thinking about that. And I think it could look a lot of different ways, and people can absolutely, whether it's a discovery activity or just part of their other supported employment services, can kind of utilize that time to build that, and you can support them in doing that. And to Nancy's point, those look so different nowadays, right? It doesn't have to be about the traditional resume. And I think if anything, businesses are actually blown away when people come forth with something that's personalized and individualized kind of to them or to the field, and kind of shows that level of commitment and interest and creativity and is an opportunity to really kind of highlight some of those skill sets that they're kind of bringing to the table anyway. So sorry, that was a long-winded answer to just say, yes, absolutely. That can be
good ideas, very good ideas. Thank you.
You had a great idea.
I really like the idea of making it personalized for them and letting them do it themselves.
Yeah, I think, yeah, and then you can support them in whatever way they need supported. And then that also helps you learn further, right, about just more about them, right? How do they best learn? How are they best supported? You'll probably learn more about different skill sets they have as they create that, right? And it can be fun. So back to fun, right? Back to fun and interesting, because this should be fun and interesting. Again, whether we're talking about discovery or another, supported employment, service. Sorry, I hate using the word service. And I see it's 1:55. And we didn't get to talk about social capital as much as I hoped we would. But Nancy, should we try to squeeze in a minute or two of, just
Yes. Yeah, so I'm just going to speak from my heart since it's such a short time. But everything's relationships, right? There's very little that we do on our own. I mean, there are some things we do independently without anybody at all, but there are very few. Um, so relationship building is critical. It's how we move through life. We are social beings. We can't exist without one another. It goes back to, pre-written history. We have examples of people coming together in tribes or groups. So if we can help build the social capital of individuals with disabilities, then that can increase the quality of life and the outcomes that we've been charged to help the person achieve. So it's when we come together as a group and focus on a particular task or problem or outcome that we spark ideas. We spark so many more ideas than any one person can do on their own. And often when we hear what one person says, it makes us remember, oh, yeah. So social capital is critical in life. So if throughout our work with disabilities and individuals wanting to have an inclusive life, we can use every moment of every day when we're with that person in settings where there are other people and help them forge those connections. If it's no more than just saying, hi, how are you? We're glad to be here and see what you do in your business. If it's that kind of, if that makes sense. But one thing that we don't focus on is we just kind of take charge of that. We start um, moving through the process of the interaction between um, uh, someone who is not a part of our work, but an actual community member, and speak for the person or create a notion that the person cannot be a part of that normal process, that organic process of having a conversation back and forth with folks. And some folks have not developed those skills because we sheltered them so. So even being able to bridge that by helping ask a question to the person with a disability in the situation. For example, oh, they sell this particular whatever, and you love those. Don't you? Can you talk a little bit about how you got interested in this? Because that begins to show this interest. So if we can think about all the times that we can help forge relationships, and with some folks it's harder than with others, and that's not tied to disability. I am so introverted and can be so shy that I really had to develop the skills to do that and to develop a comfort level. Um, and that's no different than the folks we get to work with. Some folks are so outgoing and love to engage in folks. And then others, are timid. So if we can look at how to help build that social capital so that the person with a disability has relationships that are not a part of the disability system. And if we can utilize social capital, our social capital, the social capital of the family member, of the job seeker, social capital of coworkers. For example, if someone has an interest in health and beauty, sending out an email or checking with folks you work with and say, hey, does anybody have any connections in this industry? Anybody that we could talk with? Um, and that can be so important as we begin to shift from disability specific staff having on their shoulders the total goal, the total work to help someone become employed, and begin to pull in other people that can help make that happen. Um, because the more people who are a part of the team of the individual, the more ideas we have, the more connections we have, the more ways we can explore a person's vocational themes, their interest, that may take us to places that we never would have thought of on our own. Um, so just I don't know if that gets at kind of what we're looking at, thinking about with social capital, but it really is developing and harnessing social capital. And by harnessing, I mean um, using it. If somebody knows someone, help forge that connection so that that conversation can be had, because the person that the person you know who knows someone else uh, can help us open doors or create opportunities. Um, so if we can start thinking in that way, those normal ways that we have all gotten jobs, more likely than not, anywhere from 60 to 75% of folks get jobs because someone knew someone who helped bridge a connection. So being able to use that, build those connections, get outside of the disability system into community, and build those relationships and those connections, and make that part of how we help people have inclusive lives, whether it's what they do when they're not working, or and um, uh, in their chosen world of work.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you, Nancy. That's exactly, I think that's the perfect wrap up. And segue to that. Any questions, comments? Just lots of thank yous. Thank you for the information. I'll be sure to send out the slides, and also here, I'm going to stop sharing real quick. In the chat, I shared with you a Google Drive folder at the beginning that has a ton of great resources, both on the informational interview and social capital, and dives a little bit deeper into kind of all the different topics or pieces that Nancy and I were talking about today. I also want to share with you, if you could take a minute to complete the evaluation. See, here I go again, trying to do two things that talk to you and get something. Doesn't go well. Okay, if you could complete the evaluation, we would sure appreciate your feedback. We want to know if it was helpful and some of your takeaways. Great, and we'll be sure to share everything out to the mailing list. Nancy, thank you so much.
Well, it's a joy to meet with y'all and spend this time with people who care and want good things for folks with disabilities, just like we want good things for people without disabilities.
Yes. We're grateful to have you. So thank you so much. And thank you to all of you who joined us today. I will see you all, hopefully, back in June. I'm really excited about June's topic as well. This is huge. Brita, please share this with membership. We're going to be talking about when day habilitation leads to work. And Michaela Simmons and Carla Keft out of from Hope Haven in Rock Valley are doing some incredible work out there, and really working closely with their DayHab program to move folks from DayHab into employment services and having conversations about employment in day services. And I think they're doing some really incredible stuff. And of course, it's fully integrated, right? And it pays attention to the settings rules, the final settings rules. So really excited to have them here June. I'm sorry, I wrote it down and now I can't find it for y'all, but I will share that date with you. But I believe it's June 21st, the third Tuesday of the month at 1 p.m. So I'll be sure, yep, June 21st. So thank you so much, and we'll see you in June. It is May right now. Okay, thank you.
Bye, everybody. Great to meet you all.